So today we're going to take this drive shaft and we're going to put it up inside this car. Now, the drive shaft's going to allow me to move it, but I haven't done the brakes yet. I've kind of started. As you can see, I've ran new lines from the drums all the way up to the connector here, but I haven't gone much farther than that, and the reason is I ran into brake line, and the fittings up at the master are quite ridiculous in size, so I might try to change out the master for a completely different one. But we're just going to leave the brakes alone for a bit and we're going to work on this drive shaft. So I fully believe that this thing's too long, because as you can see right there, I've already cut and extended this drive shaft to go from a Chevy car into a 79 Lincoln Continental. So a Continental's obviously a lot longer than a newer Crown Vic. So the first thing we got to do is we got to take this drive shaft, put it up, see if it fits, see how much we got to take off. Now when you're putting these into your transmissions, your slider, you want to have about 1 inch sticking out of the back of the transmission. So that allows for the movement of the axle to go in and out into the back of the transmission. But we're going to throw a whole bunch of gear oil on here, like transmission stuff, just to lubricate this up so we're not wrecking the seal in the back of the transmission. But this is for Chevy, and as you can see here, this is where I've cut and extended it. But what I really like about this drive shaft is it's got a double U-joint back here. Now it's more prone to braking, I guess, but this will allow for more movement when the axle really starts to bend. Now it's nothing like one of your slider shafts, but again, this here saves me money and it allows me to get it in there. I'm even going to take the grinder and I'm going to grind these down just a bit so I can get a little bit more clearances inside there. So that way, a little bit more than that obviously. But let's try to get this thing fitted and see how she goes. So what we're going to do is we're just going to slide this into the back of the transmission. Try not to smash it off the floor too fucking hard. Yeah. Wait a minute. Well, she's not in there far enough for my liking. Okay, so that's just about in there as far as she's going to go. Now as you can see, she's too long. So we will be cutting some length out of this. Now this is where we're going to measure and find out how much it's out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get a rough estimate on how much it's out. So we're going to go from this mounting surface to this one. Obviously try to make that as happy as pleased it would be to mount to it, which is, I would say would be right about there. I'm going to say 9 1/4 inches is what we need to shorten this drive shaft up. So we're going to cut 9 1/4. What do we have here at the front? We have 8. And at the back, we have 8. So that means that we're going to have to make 2 separate cuts to this drive shaft. So we're going to have to cut it here and then move this up. And then we're going to cut this one here and we're going to move this back. Now I'd like to move this one here back farther than my previous cut. So that way there's less cuts, obviously is the better, right? So we're going to move this one back and then we'll put this back in and then we'll remeasure. So let's get this cut, slid in, and then removed and re-welded. I'll show you guys how I cut these here coming up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a zip cut and we're going to trace this weld all the way around. And once we zip cut into it, we're going to switch to a grinding disc. And we're going to just basically use the grinding disc as a zip cutter. Now for you guys that have lathes and milling machines and all that, it's much easier to do this on those. But for me, I don't have those. And I'd love to have them, but I don't. So I use mini grinders, and getting it apart, you don't really want to dig in too deep. This is just basically thin metal. So you just want to go in maybe a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. It might even be a little too much on an 1/8. And then go around with this, and then you just smack it off with the hammer once you go all the way around. You'll start to be able to see the separate layers of the steel. So let's get started on this. We're only going to do the front, so we're going to do cut the front off, and then we're going to cut the back off behind our previous welds, and then we're going to bring this up, we're going to tack weld it, and then remeasure again for the back. So do you see that crack around there? That's what I'm telling you about. You can see where the two metals start separating. So let's get this smashed off with a hammer, and then I'll show you another technique how to do that up there. So we've gone all the way around with the grinder. Now we're just going to hit the bottom of the U-joint, both sides. It's going to want to come out evenly. Just hit it evenly. Just like that. So basically that's how you take off the end. Now let me show you a technique so you can get the squarest cut possible on a round pipe. When you go to reinsert the U-joint and the end transfer case piece, you want the drive shaft to be as square as possible. Now how you do that is basically what's called a pipe wrap. How you do is you just wrap this around the area, like so, and you want these pieces to stay perfectly aligned all the way around. Just the edge of the paper at this end over here. Now what you're doing is basically making a wrap that goes all the way around the pipe so that it's a perfect circle. Take your marker, draw your line. Like so. Now that is just about as square as you're going to get that. So let's cut this, and then we're going to clean this up just a bit. We're going to slide it in the end and see how she looks. So because how this axle drops, this drive shaft drops down on that, usually I like to use just a 1 foot straight edge and just kind of make sure that everything's straight, but I can't really do that on this because of the drop down. The 1 foot's usually the thing, my go-to tool, but we're just going to step it down to this one. All we want to do is kind of make sure that this is centered. See, it's a little bit this way right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a tack weld here, and then we'll just pound it in a bit. So you don't want to go super crazy on the welds to begin with. You just want to take your time and make sure this thing is as straight as possible. Now what we're going to do is just do tack welds all the way around it until we're happy with how she looks. So like that's got to go in. So now this side's done, and as you can see, we have it right in front of the dip before the drive shaft. Now the back, I got to do the same thing over again, so I'm going to do that without filming because you guys have already seen it done once. You don't need to see it be done twice. So see you once the back is done. So the front end's welded, and the back end is cut. As you can see, it just slides in. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to test fit this into the car to make sure it's the proper length and everything works and looks good before we weld that. Obviously, we're going to take the buffing pad and clean all the rust out of there and all the rust around the edges so that way we get nicer welds. But let's do a quick check to see if she fits inside the drive shaft location. Again, the first thing... Okay, we'll pick that up in a few minutes. So the first thing you're going to do is slide it into the back of the transmission. Then put your drive shaft U-joints onto it. Put them together and see if she'll work. You want it to be a bit shorter, that way it'll slide back. So that's perfect. Everything's going to work. So let's take this back out. We'll clean it up and fully weld it, and then we can put this drive shaft inside this car. Well, are you guys ready? Here comes the moment of truth. Slide her into the transmission. Oh, I fucked up. I'm just joking. Everything looks good. I'm just joking with you guys. Just grab some bolts. I've already got it drilled out for 3/8 bolts. Now the reason I drill it out for 3/8 is because I think 3/8 is probably the strongest bolt that can go into the drive shaft. I guess you could drill it out for larger, but I don't really see a massive point to go larger than 3/8. Doesn't really matter for the first one. Just get her in there and started. Second one's the one that counts. So we're just going to spin this rear axle. There we go. There's the second one. There you guys have it. We built our own drive shaft. We shortened it. We made it fit. We welded 2 ends on it. We actually did a lot more cutting than we required than normal because we actually had to cut both ends because this was the drive shaft from the Continental, which has got a crazy long wheelbase. And then we put it inside this Crown Vic. So you know what, guys know what the next thing is to do, right? Test her out. I don't have any brakes, but I think it's time for a test drive. Well, the time has come. I don't even know if the battery's charged in this thing. It's pretty much sat since I finished building it. What was that? Probably 2 months ago. Sat outside. Pushed into the shop with the Nissan, so we'll see if she even starts up. See if I can remember how to do this. Okay, so distributor, fuel pump, starter. I don't know, that sounds pretty dead to me. Should I jump in it? Yeah, let's jump in it. See what happens when I jump in it. Give her some pumps. see if she drives. So now we're inside the car, pump it a couple times. Distributor. So she's running. Reverse. Well, maybe that has something to do with it. No transmission fluid. So I guess let's make a trip to town and we can go buy some transmission fluid. Canadian Tire closes at 9, so I'll have to do it before 9. Because all I have is engine oil. I don't have any transmission fluid, so that's a good thing. Not really. Let's go buy some super expensive red liquid.